The intention in NAFTA, remember, was to ram it through without anybody knowing about it. That's another one of those stories that was suppressed. The NAFTA, which is obviously a major story, the NAFTA agreement was signed by the three executives, Canada, United States, and this was Bush, and Mexico on, I think it was August 12th, 1992. That's right in the middle of a presidential campaign. You know, everybody talking about policy. They signed the NAFTA agreement. Not a peep, you know. Nobody knew about it. There's a law in the United States, 1974 trade law, which requires that the Labor Advisory Council, that's a union-based organization, be involved in consultation and advice and, you know, decisions about any trade-related legislation. Well, they weren't informed. Actually, they were informed 24 hours before a deadline to give an opinion. They were told on, I think it was September 15th, like a month later, you have 24 hours, here's the 2,200-page text. They didn't even give them the text. They just said, here, we have a 2,200-page text. Tomorrow is your deadline for giving your opinion about it, so they couldn't even meet. Actually, they did publish quite a good analysis, which was also, none of this was ever reported, nor was their quite good analysis ever reported. And in fact, the idea was that the whole thing would just be rammed through without anybody knowing about it. Well, that didn't quite happen, and it didn't happen precisely because there was a lot of popular agitation, which made it a big issue, and it continued to right through the whole business not with the public pretty strongly opposed to NAFTA. I mean, of the part of the public that had an opinion, you know, a lot of people didn't know about it, but of the people who had an opinion, I think it was roughly 60% were opposed right through till the end. And that was because of the public agitation and, you know, the labor movement and others. And on GATT, you know, there's been a huge mobilization. 50 years is enough, block GATT, block change the World Bank, and so on. Of course, it doesn't get any publicity, but it's substantial. Incidentally, as to the consequences of NAFTA, you can get them straight out in the mainstream press, very straight. The day after the NAFTA, and they're very revealing, the day after NAFTA was passed finally, big, you know, the press was 100% in favor of it, in fact, fanatic about it. You know, they were hysterical. This goes all the way over to the left, you know, what's called the left, Anthony Lewis and people. Absolutely hysterical, you know, bitterly attacking labor for what Lewis called its crude, threatening tactics and its, you know, unenlightened attitude because it was opposing this obviously great thing. That went all, I didn't see an exception to this, all the way across. Maybe you can find one if you look, but it was close to 100% hysterical advocacy, not just advocacy. The day after NAFTA was passed, the New York Times ran its first story on the expected impact in the New York region the day after it was passed. Well, the story was euphoric. It's going to be really terrific. And then they described what would happen. They said that it'll be really great for corporate law firms and investment banks and the publications industry like the New York Times and capital-intensive industry like chemical corporations and all the nice people. They'll do fine. Then it said there'll also be some losers, and the losers are women, blacks, Hispanics, and semi-skilled workers, meaning 70% of the workforce. Okay, so women, blacks, Hispanics, and 70% of the workforce, they'll be losers. But, you know, there's always got to be winners and losers. So therefore, it's terrific. It wasn't a secret. Also, this was known in advance. Like if you read the economists who were advocating NAFTA, like say Paul Krugman, who was then at MIT, who were saying it's a great thing, there was always a line there somewhere saying, well, yeah, semi-skilled workers will lose income, like 70% of the workforce. So it was never really a secret. I mean, of course, in a sense, it was a secret because you really had to be searching to find it, and you had to wait until the day after it was passed to get the New York Times analysis of what it was going to do to the region. But they understood. And the same, incidentally, is true of Mexico. It had exactly the same effect on Mexico. There's a lot of talk about is it good for the United States or is it bad for the United States, and that's just totally meaningless. You know, you have to ask who in the United States and who in Mexico. I mean, it's great for rich people in Mexico. It's great for rich people in the United States, and it's bad for everybody else. But that's the purpose of social policy, after all. And pretty much the same is true of GATT. Incidentally, these things are not free trade agreements. These are investor rights agreements, which are a complicated combination of protection and liberalization. One of the things that the Times, for example, approved of most was the protectionist elements in NAFTA, which they call intellectual property rights, which radically extend protectionism in completely new and unprecedented directions to ensure that the technology of the future will be monopolized by major corporations, and that, say, India can't produce cheap drugs for its population and so on. Those are the things they really were enthusiastic about. These are not free trade agreements.